row. And I'm welcome to this afternoon's panel discussion on the 2025 budget statement and economic policy of Ghana that was presented to Parliament last week by the Minister of Finance. I am one of 3 co-PIs leading the project promoting effective policies for women's economic empowerment in Ghana. And the other co-PIs are Akosua Darkwa and Georgie Chikata. We work with a team of 6 researchers and postdoctoral researchers. Now, existing scholarship points to several crucial conditions for promoting women's empowerment. These are laws and policies that make it possible for women to participate fully in the economy, measures that strengthen their access to and control of productive and reproductive resources, including land and finance, social policies that give women voice in decision-making and reduce their care burdens and guarantee them the needed social security and protect them from gender-based violence, and policies that increase their access to decent work opportunities. Now, the goal of this project is to address a key need of the government, which is to achieve a critical mass of economically empowered women in Ghana through strengthening the effectiveness of gender-responsive policymaking and implementation for women's economic empowerment. Now, late last year, the Affirmative Action Gender Equity Act, Act 1121, was passed. This is the most recent and critically important legislation to, and I quote, ensure the attainment of gender equity in the political, social, economic, educational, and cultural spheres of the society, end of quote. So of relevance to us this afternoon is Section 19 of the Act, which is on gender-responsive budgeting. It says that, and I quote again, government shall take steps to promote gender-responsive budgeting in all sectors, end of quote. Over here, we're going to be defining gender-responsive budgeting quite broadly to consider how government finances its spending, that's its revenue, its spending, and the impact it will have on women and men. So we're looking at the taxation side, and then how government allocates the resources that it's so acquired, and the impact that this allocation has on women and men. So we think it's important to situate today's discussions with this new act. Now, this afternoon, our panelists, I beg your pardon, will apply a gender lens to the government's budget and economic policy statement. It will do this by investigating the different ways in which the budget promotes or hinders women's economic empowerment. And the analysis is going to be informed by different perspectives. There will be an assessment of the taxation measures and expenditure patterns, and of the budget from the perspective of care and financial inclusion. And there will be an assessment from the perspective of women entrepreneurs. So we are looking forward to fruitful discussions this afternoon. We shall begin by asking our panelists to give us their overall perspective of the budget. And we would like them to do this in 1 minute each. So that will constitute the first round of presentations. And then in the second round, each panelist will take a deeper dive into their analysis of the budget. So once that's done, then the floor will be open for questions and answers. And then we will end with closing remarks of the organizers. So this is to give you an idea of how we intend to spend our time this afternoon. But before we proceed, I would like to introduce our panelists. So our first panelist is Teresa Oparibia Ayode. She's a member of the Executive Women's Network. She's a creative entrepreneur, an event specialist, an industry catalyst, and a female business leader. So Teresa is a highly accomplished creative entrepreneur with 28 years of experience in crafting unforgettable experiences, connecting people, and driving business results. She has a proven track record of innovation, leadership, and excellence in the events, marketing, and creative industry. As the co-founder of Charterhouse, Ghana's leading creative agency over the past 25 years, Teresa has spearheaded iconic events like the Ghana Music Awards and Festival. Her expertise spans marketing, communications, event production, and talent development. She's passionate about empowering creatives, women, and the youth to thrive. Our second panelist is Mr. Godson Aloyito. Godson has over a decade's experience in economic research, policy advisory, public finance management, and working with civil society, government, and multilateral organizations. He is currently a postdoc researcher on the project, our project, Women's Economic Empowerment Project, and works specifically on the spending policies of the central government in Ghana. Our second panelist is Dr. Nanama Ening Opondria. Nanama is a postdoctoral fellow on the We Ghana project and works specifically on financial inclusion policies of the government, interrogating the extent to which the design is gender equitable and its outcomes. Prior to this, she worked as a research assistant on an International Center for Tax and Development project that explored the relationship between taxation and social protection among informal workers in Accra. She's an adjunct lecturer at the Department of Agricultural Extension in the School of Agriculture at the University of Ghana, and she serves as the Accra Tax Project Coordinator for Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing, WIGO, at ISA. Next, we have Dr. Gloria Aful-Mensah. Gloria is a researcher on the We Ghana project and is responsible for analyzing the domestic resource mobilization policies of the Ghanaian government. She's a senior lecturer in economics at the University of Ghana, and her research interests are in the areas of health, poverty, inequality, and development. And finally, we have Dr. Faustina Obeng-Aduma. Faustina is a researcher on the We Ghana project and is responsible for interrogating the gender equitable design processes of care policies and its outcomes. She's a critical geographer whose research interests lie at the intersection of micro and macro level agrarian changes, social relations, and economic structures. She also works as a gender equality and social inclusion consultant with the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, the IITA. So these are our panelists, and I would like us to begin our discussions, our 1 minute perspective of the budget that was presented to Parliament last week. And I would like to call on Teresa Ayoade to give her perspective in 1 minute. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for having me on this eminent, this panel full of such distinguished personalities as you all are. What are my quick thoughts? A short story. When I was invited by EWN to be on this panel, I actually didn't pay attention to the topic because I was in the throes of organizing the National Women's Summit and I was extremely busy. But once I heard women's empowerment, women's economic empowerment, I said, yes, count me in. And then from an entrepreneur's perspective, then I read it closely and I saw it was about the budget. And I said to myself, I'm not a budget expert. I'm not a financial analyst. You know, it's not my subject area. I'm not a subject area expert. So what do I do? And I remembered something that was said at the National Women's Summit. One of our panelists, Janet Simpamos, our executive director, she said something about the first thing that comes to women's minds when we are faced with such things is, I can't. And I told myself, I can do it. So for the first time, I read the budget from end to end. This is the first time I've ever done this. And it was quite an interesting read. And in there, I saw opportunities for women and opportunities that women can take advantage of. The Bible says, my people suffer for lack of knowledge. So when you are knowledgeable about what exists out there, then you can actually be intentional about going after it. And I think for me, that's my impression about the budget. There are lots of opportunities in there, and women need to be aware and need to be empowered and assisted to go for them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we now move on to Gloria, Dr. Gloria Apple-Mensah.
All right, hi. So for me, my assessment about the budget is mixed. I'm excited by some of the issues and also a little disappointed by some other areas. So maybe I'll start with what is making me happy. So the first one is has to do with the pre-budget engagement. And so I think about a few days for the budget to be read, the minister went to some market centers and spoke with some market women and KIAs. I think this is a very good initiative, which I haven't seen in the previous budget or haven't heard of in the previous budget, because this gives women the opportunity to raise their concerns to the people who matter in terms of decisions about revenue mobilization and, of course, spending. And so I believe that it's a very useful initiative. The other is obviously the removal of e-levy, which I'm sure that I'll be given the opportunity to talk about it more and because we know that women would really benefit from it because of the impact the policy had on them. The negative has to do with the way resource mobilization policies are designed in the budget. It's revenue driven. And so for me, it lacks inclusivity. So that is something that probably later on we'll talk about. Then the other is, even though I said I was happy that the minister started, began engagement with the women and KIAs, I think it was a little late. And so we are not really sure the extent to which their views to be incorporated in the budget. But I would want to stay positive and think that, this budget has a lot of potential in terms of improving women's empowerment.
Thank you. I would like to call on Godson for your impressions. Godson, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad to be here. So my initial thoughts about the budget are that I am pleased with the government's fiscal policy goal to operate within its means by aligning its expenditures with our fiscal policy, our fiscal realities, and prioritizing spending-led fiscal adjustments, eliminating unnecessary expenditures, and ensuring value for money in all government outlays. I think will help reduce our fiscal deficits and borrowing requirements. I'm also happy with the fact that the government is resolved to strictly implement sanctions in the PFM Act, particularly in cases of arrears accumulation and commitment control breaches. And lastly, I'm thrilled about the proposal to allocate at least 80% of the district assemblies common fund directly to the district assemblies, allowing local authorities to take charge of their development agenda and deepen our decentralization efforts. So for me, those are the things that excite me about the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. So may I call on Nanama?
For me, I think the budget looks good when it comes to women access to useful and affordable financial services. That is financial inclusion. If it's done well, it can empower women in phenomenal ways. I also like the coding and digital-based jobs, which can really work for both young women and men. The budget again talks about a resetting agenda that is anchored on 3 things, and this includes women and youth, which is great. My challenge though is that when I look at the rest of the document, I don't see the consistency in terms of the attention that is given. So for example, if I look at the economic and financial sectors, even though they talk about achieving SDGs and the AU agenda goals, Agenda 5, SDG 5, which talks about gender equality, is conspicuously missing. And then for AU2 agenda goals, Agenda 17 is also missing from this. So we know that women play a big role in the economy. So if we don't include them as key in these areas, I think that we might not include them properly at the conceptualization stage. Again, when it comes to the fiscal policy objectives, it talks about tax payments, compliance, domestic revenue mobilization, but there's no concrete objective to support the vulnerable. So it's kind of mixed for me. I'm excited about certain things, but I think that the potential to empower women needs more critical thinking to achieve women's empowerment. Otherwise, women issues will get lost right as we flick to the next pages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anama. And finally, I will call on Christina. Christina Benaduma.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think I also have mixed feelings about the budget. On one hand, the budget is very commendable because it states that it offers a trusted hand to the vulnerable, particularly women and youth. And it is demonstrated by the many social interventions that are allocated some budgets in the statement. But when you also look at the fact that these social policies are supposed to be implemented within a budget that is also talking about a shock therapy, which is evident in proposals to cut down spending massively, then it's commendable that the budget didn't cut social spending, which in our experience, we know that anytime there are some efforts to stabilize the economy, and which results in massive budget cuts, social sectors get to really suffer. So it's commendable to see that there are indeed enough budget allocations for the social sectors and the introduction of new social protection measures. But on the other hand, I think there are some silences in the budget in terms of what really care is about, in terms of monies that are allocated to active care, but also how the government approaches some economic policies without a very nuanced perspective on how these economic policies would have some indirect effects on care work, especially the energy sectors that are very influential in lessening the burden of care work. So hopefully we'll get to dive into the details in the subsequent section. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So indeed, with the opportunity to present your initial thoughts, you're raising lots of issues that you say are going to be considered in the next round when you take a deep dive. So what I'm picking up here is that the budget does contain policies that are relevant for women. Women are not entirely left out, and indeed they are stated explicitly in the budget, although there's the concern about consistency. And I think there is a word that is sometimes used in the literature in terms of policy evaporation. So we flag the issue that much as SDG goals are flagged, there's not much mention made of SDG 5, which is gender equality. So I think we can move on with our presentations now as we provide more depth to these initial thoughts. And I am going to call on Gloria to make her presentation. We want to be able to make our presentations and then open up the floor for discussion. So I'm going to be quite strict with the time. So we have between 5 to 7 minutes to make our presentation so that we can in the end leave enough time for a floor discussion and questions and answers. So Dr. Aphul-Mensah, floor is open.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. So basically, I am looking at the budget in terms of the revenue mobilization policies. And well, as those of us who have read, there are quite a number of them, but then because of the limitation with time, I'll just look at a few of them. And I will begin by looking at the removal of the e-levy. Of course, that's very topical. And this is really a pleasant news because, I mean, since the e-levy was implemented in 2022, there have been several studies, and the evidence is quite conclusive in that the e-levy has had a disproportionate impact on the poor and women in particular. I mean, whether you look at women as business owners or consumers. And so I'll just refer, maybe some of us are familiar with a study done by Ayin Dowu and who in 2023. I mean, they looked at business owners, I mean, both men and women. And the highlight of the study, or the major finding from the study, was that the e-levy has had a disproportionate impact on women in terms of revenue, in terms of sales, in terms of profitability. And in fact, if you look at related literature, like I said, they all point to this. And so for me, and where I sit in terms of revenue mobilization policies in the budget, removing the e-levy implies that the poor and then women-owned businesses would be relieved from this burden. And what this means is that for women business owners, they can compete well, and this could have positive implications on their sales, their profit margin, and I mean, it would have further implications on their economic empowerment. So there is no doubt that the removal of the e-levy would positively influence women's economic empowerment. Again, the budget outlined several other taxes that were to be removed. And so, I mean, a few of them include the betting tax, the VAT on motor vehicle insurance policy, the emission levy, and so on and so forth. Well, on the face of it, this may be inconsequential to women, right? Unless we want to believe that women form a significant group of people involved in these activities. That is, more women are engaged in, say, betting, more women own cars, and then we may think that the removal of those taxes would have implication on their economic empowerment. However, you can also look at it indirectly. If the removal of VAT or motor vehicle insurance and the emission levy could translate into, say, a reduction in transport fares, then we can think about its implication on women's economic status or their economic empowerment. And so indirectly, if these the elimination of these taxes do reflect in transport fares in terms of reduction, then we can argue that they will have a positive implication on women's economic empowerment. Then I would also want to talk about the reforms the proposed reforms in the VAT. I must say this is a good intention, and in fact, reforms in the VAT are long overdue, okay? But I would want to comment on this in two ways. So we all know VAT is a consumption tax, and clearly consumption expenditure is gendered. What that means is that there are certain goods that are either exclusively consumed by, say, women or men, perhaps, or there are also empirical evidence that shows that women tend to spend more on certain groups of expenditure, like education, health, food, while men, on the other hand, tend to spend more on recreation, housing, alcohol, tobacco, and so on and so forth. And so if we cast our minds back to what happened last year when we saw that there was an import duty waiver on imported raw materials for the local production of sanitary pads. I mean, this is clearly a good way to affect women directly. And in the budget, the minister indicated that they will seek technical assistance from the IMF. What I want to stress is that because VAT is a consumption tax, and because consumption is gendered, in fact, there's evidence to show that consumption expenditure is gendered, I think that this could be an opportunity for the government to insist on gender-sensitive VAT during their engagement with the fund. Okay, for instance, the waiver could be extended to hygiene products in general, not just the sanitary pads. Again, I would want to suggest or look at the reforms in this way that if in the budget, the minister indicated that he is yet to constitute a committee, okay, for the review. Again, I want to stress that given that the VAT is a consumption tax and consumption expenditure is gendered, I think the composition of the committee should be fairly gender balanced. I mean, we want to see women well represented in order to, push for reforms that will affect women, whether as consumers or business owners, positively. And so I believe that these are potential ways in which reforms in the VAT could be designed in a way that will empower women economically. Now, the other issue I would want to raise is the non-tax revenue. So oftentimes we make the blanket statement that the informal sector is under tax. Well, this is not wholly true from my perspective, because we also lose sight of the fact that people in the informal sector are also burdened with fees, levies, and tolls and other payment obligations, right? And so we need to look at policies that, will take into consideration the segmentation of the informal sector, instead of just coming out with a policy that is general to them, because in that case, certain groups of people in the informal sector, particularly the women traders, the market women who are already paying, a lot of tolls and fees and other charges, and so they are already burdened. If we design, a policy that treats the informal sector as, like a single unit, then some people would more likely be affected more. In this case, women will be at a disadvantage. So that is one thing that I want to probably, in as much as the budget is clear on coming out with policies to increase non-tax revenue, particularly from the informal sector, I think that it is something that we need to look at it carefully in terms of the segmentation of the informal sector. Then maybe finally, I want to.
Your time is up. They need to wind up.
Okay. I would conclude with the property tax. So property tax, personally, I think the budget is quite explicit on exploring property rates, right? I must say that it's unfortunate that as a country we haven't fully harnessed the potential of property taxes. And this also again should not be seen as the source of just raising revenue or mobilizing revenue, but this is one way in which, if the property tax is designed properly, then we can generate revenue. At the same time, we'll be able to use it as a way to redistribute income in a way that will improve the lives of women and the poor in our economy. So I'll just end here so that later on, when it comes to the engagement, maybe we'll talk about some other issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gloria. So I would now like to call on Godson. Godson, you have 7 minutes and it starts now.
Okay, thank you. So I'm looking at the expenditure side of the budget. Yeah, so as an overview, the government has allocated 269 billion for this year's expenditure, and this represents a 19% increase from last year's figure of 226 billion. And then the budget for goods and services has been reduced by 39% from the 11.6 billion that was expended last year to about 7 billion this year. Thankfully, CAPEX has seen an upward increase by 15%, and notably social benefits, including leave, school feeding, capitation grants have been increased to 3.2 billion from the 737 billion that was expended last year. Looking at the sectors, social sectors, sectors that matter to women and girls, the education budget has seen some decline in terms of allocations from 13% in 2024 to about 10% this year. Likewise, the health budget, 7% from 7% in 2024 to about 5% this year. The Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection's budget has also declined substantially from 1%, which is about 2.4 billion allocations last year, to just about 112 million cedis this year, which is within the region of about 0.04% of total government shares. So in terms of, we see some decline in the social sector, social sectors in terms of the budgetary allocations this year. So looking at the key, how spending plans affect women, girls, studies have shown that fiscal policy choices that address gender equality, such as investing in education, improved infrastructure, providing safe water, clean fuels, reduce the time spent on unpaid care work, while providing women with the opportunity to enter paid employment. And these create more economic opportunities for women, increase economic growth, and then reduce poverty and inequality. So how does the 2025 budget foster economic empowerment for women and girls to ensure equal access to economic opportunities? In education, the budget outlines useful interventions that have allocations from the first I would look at is the allocation to provide comprehensive curriculum-based textbooks to learners in KG, primary textbooks, JHS 3 textbooks. And then we see an increase in allocation to the capitation grant on capping of the GET fund to fully fund the free SHS policy. And we see allocations in the budget to distribute free sanitary pads to primary and secondary school students. And then we see allocations made towards free tertiary education for persons with disability. And then the high-flying one, which is the no academic fee policy for all first-year students. So Ghana has made significant strides in achieving gender parity in education. Already we have attained parity at the kindergarten, primary, and then secondary, junior secondary levels as of 2022. But however, there is still some work to be done at the senior high school level and then at the tertiary levels, where gender parity currently stands at 0.95 and 0.93 respectively. So it is expected that the enhanced funding of the free senior high school will address the current challenges faced by the policy, so that it will improve teaching and learning. An improved school environment will obviously increase the likelihood that more girls will pass the WASSCE and therefore qualify for entry into tertiary institutions and then benefit from the no academic fee policy that government has proposed. Also, looking at the 292 million cedis allocated to the free sanitary pads initiative, it seems inadequate to reach all girls. So government could therefore consider girls in hard-to-reach schools, for example, girls that are also in low-income communities. Since the amount doesn't, it seems inadequate to cover all girls, there should be some level of targeting so that it will reach girls who indeed need some of the sanitary pads. Okay, the other initiative that was outlined that concerns women is the plan of government to establish a women's development bank, which would offer low-interest loans, customized financial services to support women-owned businesses with an initial investment of 51.3 million. This bank has, for me, has the potential to address the credit challenges that women entrepreneurs face by providing access to vital resources, helping them set up or expand their businesses. Also, the Ministry of Trade and Agribusiness intends to implement the Women in Trade and the Women in Trade, Agribusiness and Industry program to empower women entrepreneurs and provide support for women in cross-border trade, among others. But we do not have a budget line to look at the details on that in the budget. But this is obviously an area women would have to look at as it provides opportunity for growth. The other initiative. Okay, Prof. The other initiatives by the government, which has to do with skills training and development initiatives, like the National Apprenticeship Program, the National Coders Program, also have potential to empower young people. But to ensure equal opportunities, these programs must be designed to promote gender balance and inclusivity. And then lastly, there is also a program dubbed the Agriculture for Economic Transformation Agenda, which has an allocation of 1.5 billion. So it includes Feed Ghana program, vegetable development project, and all of that. So to ensure inclusive benefits, it should prioritize addressing the gender disparities in the agri sector and to ensure that the benefits accruing will be inclusive to all. And hopefully the Women in Agri Development Directorate will be part of the decision-making in terms of policy formulation at the initial stages to ensure that the women's interests are protected along the agri value chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Godson. I would now like to call on Teresa Ayoade to make her presentation.
Hello.
No, Teresa, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So it's a privilege to be able to present my my thoughts, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a woman who has lived the reality of doing business in Ghana. Women are the backbone of Ghana's economy. We are the market traders, the industrialists, the agribusiness leaders, the technology pioneers. We are also the service industry leaders. Yet systemic barriers continue to limit our full participation and success. The 2025 budget introduces new policies and interventions, and we would like to see how they truly empower women economically. We'll be looking at the historical background of women's economic power in Ghana, the challenges that we face, and the opportunities that the budget addresses. So, Ghanaian women have always been at the heart of commerce and industry. But despite government interventions, the gender gap in business ownership, access to finance, and formal employment remains high. Currently, women-owned businesses contribute 44% to Ghana's GDP, but we remain underrepresented in high-growth sectors such as technology, manufacturing, and finance. The challenges that we face as entrepreneurs in Ghana start off, first of all, with limited access to finance. women-owned businesses receive only 10% of commercial loans, often due to lack of collateral and financial literacy gaps. Microfinance options exist, but they come with high interest rates and limited scalability. There's also education and skills gap, where women make up less than 25% of STEM graduates in Ghana. Technical skills training for women remains low. Limited participation in industries like agribusiness, construction, digital technology, etc. Market access and business growth is also a challenge. Over 80% of women-led businesses operate in the informal sector, meaning they lack access to government contracts, investments, and global markets. Women-owned businesses struggle to scale, often stuck in micro or small-scale operations. I think I've heard some of the speakers talk about lack of social protection and support systems, unpaid domestic work and childcare responsibilities that hinder women's ability to expand businesses or seek formal employment. In Ghana, women spend 3 times more hours in unpaid domestic work than men. And of course, we have the tax and policy burdens that have also created additional challenges. What are the opportunities for women entrepreneurs in the budget? The budget introduces several initiatives aimed at reducing these barriers. Let's analyze the potential impact. First of all, one exciting one I found is the Women's Development Bank, which has been given a budget of 51.3 million cedis. This is supposed to improve access to finance, which has been a long-standing challenge for women entrepreneurs. The Women's Development Bank will provide low-interest loans and tailored business support for women in trade, manufacturing, agribusiness, and technology. Now, if properly implemented, this could be a game changer for women's financial inclusion. There's also the free sanitary pads for schoolgirls. A budget line item of 292.4 million has been allocated. This is for keeping girls in school, because we know that menstrual health is a silent economic barrier. Many girls miss school due to lack of sanitary products. So ensuring continuous education for girls lead to better economic participation in the long term. There's also the National Coders Program, which has been allocated 100 million cedis in the budget. This is about bringing more women into tech. The tech industry is one of the fastest growing in Ghana, yet women make up only 17% of ICT professionals. This program aims to train young Ghanaians, including women, in coding and digital skills. If allocations are based on Ghana's 50.7% female population, more women will gain access to high-income digital jobs. Then there's the Agriculture for Economic Transformation agenda, which has already been mentioned, empowering women with a budget of 1.5 billion cedis. Agriculture employs 52% of Ghana's labor force and contributes 54% to GDP. Women play a major role in agribusiness, yet only 8.2% of female farmers receive support under the Planting for Food program. So only 8.2% of female farmers received support. So this shows that there could be a policy, but how does it affect women? How does it translate into economic empowerment for women? Is a question we need to answer. Ensuring equal distribution of resources in this initiative could unlock massive growth for women in agribusiness. There's also the National Apprenticeship Program, which has been given 300 million cedis in the budget. This is for skills for women entrepreneurs. More funding means women can receive training in vocational and entrepreneurial skills. The key benefits for women will be increased employability in garments, beauty, manufacturing, construction, etc. And women have been shown to have higher completion rates than men in such programs, up to 10% higher completion rates than men in such programs. It is also a pathway to self-employment. Women can shift from wage work to business ownership. There's also the Made in Ghana agenda, boosting women-owned businesses through government procurement. We're told that government procurement will prioritize local products, a major opportunity for women in fashion, textile, food processing, and agribusiness. So I think for this one, we'll do some capacity building programs to ensure that women-owned businesses can meet quality and supply requirements. Of course, I mean, the tax reforms will affect everybody if they go through. And so we are eagerly awaiting the tax reforms, especially for the VAT reviews. And there are other social protection programs like the LEAP benefits and the school feeding programs, which will support low-income families and reduce financial burdens on women entrepreneurs. If these are expanded properly, these programs can allow more women to focus on building businesses. So in conclusion, does this budget empower women? In some areas it does, but there's still a lot of work to be done. In the areas of the Women's Development Bank, it addresses the financial barriers. There's free sanitary pads that support long-term female education, the investments in tech through the capacity building, the agribusiness through the program we mentioned earlier, the apprenticeship programs, etc. All of these open new opportunities for women. But there are no direct policies addressing women's unpaid domestic labor, which I think one of the speakers mentioned. And then also there's an unclear gender-targeted distribution of funds. Resources must be fairly allocated to women in all sectors. So though it ticks some boxes, I think we need to be more intentional in ensuring that the opportunities are equitably distributed for women to be able to participate in them and enjoy the benefits of these policies. And this is where the question, I have a question. Who is safeguarding the women's allocation of these resources, women's portion in all of these budget allocations? Which government agency is going to ensure that women get their fair share of all these policies and are not sidelined in the allocation of resources for these policies? That's where I end my submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much for staying fairly within the time limit. Thank you. So we go on to our next presenter, and I'm going to call on Nanama.
Okay, so I'm going to look at it from the digital financial inclusion and digitalization perspective. So I'm going to talk about the electronic platforms, but from a different angle. So for financial inclusion, we know that women need funding for their businesses, and the digital platforms offers them the opportunity, for example, to borrow from the Momo platforms. Additionally, they don't have to carry money when they are traveling. And so this is very crucial for them. However, there are barriers. So if you look at research by Kwesa White and GISA, for example, they talk about the fact that women are less likely to use online platforms. So about 56% of men use online platforms compared to 44% of women. And then internet usage among women is lower, device access is lower, and so forth and so on. So even though I'm happy about the electronic platform, there's the issue of there are a myriad of challenges that we need to address for us to fully benefit from these. Again, when we come to the Women's Development Bank, like my other colleagues said, it's a great initiative, but for me, I think the crux of the matter is how we approach it. The good thing is that it's at the beginning, so we can make input into it. So at the conceptualization stage, when we start making inputs, then we should be able to get better outcomes. So for example, universal banks require 400 million as startup so that they can underwrite bigger transactions. The Women's Bank have 51.3 million. What does that mean? Are they going to be a bank? Are they going to be a savings and loan institution? We know that, for example, in November 2024, the Bank of Ghana issued a directive for all banks to operate a women's desk. So previously, I think there were just 3 of them out of the 23, but now all of them have women's desks. So are these women's desks going to disperse the funds of the Women's Bank? So there are quite a number of questions that we need to ask. Will they have legs in the communities. How do the rural folks fit in it? Hopefully, the bureaucracies of the universal banks will not wind itself around the Women's Bank as well. And then there's the issue of the language barrier. UNESCO, for example, says that 50% of our women are illiterate. And so it deprives us of some of the first-hand information. How do we fill those forms and those wordy documents that we have to contend with? And the question is, so to what extent is service provision going to take all of this into account? I think that we have a starting point. We have a starting point because we know that there are two key areas where women can access finance currently. So the first part is in the SUSU schemes. We know that it's predominantly patronized by women, and they are doing something good because women keep using them. The challenge, though, is that funding from these are quite limited. So in terms of scale, we might have to look at it. So how do we tap into the modalities of these SUSU schemes and incorporate them into the Women Development Bank to make it more women-friendly? We also know that non-bank financial institutions, apart from the fact that they have exorbitant interest rates, are still patronized by women. The good thing about the Women's Development Bank is that it's going to have low interest rates and tailored financial services with flexible terms. So at least that part will hopefully be taken out. So the question then again is, how do we learn from the lessons that the NBIs have so that we can enrich the financial access of women through the Women's Development Bank? So I think that for the Women's Development Bank, there is great opportunity in it. The question really is how we approach it, how we learn from existing systems that women use already and incorporate them into it. And also how women are really involved in it. I think we learned from the examples of Nigeria and other countries where Ecobank is operated, that they have products that are prepared by women for women, and these have yielded very positive results. On the coding and the digitalization projects, I think this is very useful. Like there's a target of 1 million young people that are supposed to be reached under this, who are supposed to be trained, and then they will be linked to the digital village at the University of Ghana, which is currently ongoing. And so that is one trajectory. But what is interesting is that if you look at Ghana Statistical Service, for example, they say that 57% of our population is below the age of 25. So for us to be able to create jobs for young people, this area is crucial. However, we don't have enough information to see how women and girls are reached. In the document, they talk about the fact that there's going to be 100,000 people to start the process, but that's it. Where are they coming from? Are they from rural communities? Who will be included? What kind of infrastructure and skill set is going to be made? Yes, we are going to have what they call the rural telephony project, but we also know that 20% of Ghanaians do not have access to electricity. So I think that it's good that we have all of these interesting ideas, but it's important for us to look at the very basic requirements that are needed for us to achieve these. Additionally, I think that for us to be able to create jobs, we need to clearly think through resource requirements. What exactly do we need? Yes, we need infrastructure for online systems, but we also need electricity. What are indicators, clear indicators? What are the milestones that we need to be reaching on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis, before we get to the end of the period? How are we measuring progress? How are we monitoring it? And how are we incorporating some of the learnings from the monitoring into the initiatives to make sure that women and girls are adequately part of the process? So I think that there's this critical thinking that needs to go through all of these initiatives that are linked to women and girls, and of course the vulnerable as well, young men also. to make sure that they are well thought through and they come through. Like I said, we can have all of these
Have to start winding up,
nice big
please.
statements, but if we do not have clear processes to achieve them, we might not achieve these. To conclude, I'll use this analogy. You know, academics have this word called positionality. Simply, we are saying that if you go into the sea and then you ask the whale or you ask the tuna, how is the sea like today? We'll get very different responses. So you cannot expect that the whale will make decisions on behalf of the tuna and get the same outputs, the outputs that tuna is expecting to have. So it's important to bring women on board, not just at meetings, but immerse them into the processes. And when we do that through implementation to the end, I think that we'll be able to empower them, and the initiatives will be, the objectives of these initiatives will be achieved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nanama. So I am, before I call on Faustina, just to say that please put your questions and comments in the box now, so that as soon as we're done, then we can have the ball rolling in terms of the engagement. So Faustina, please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Prof. So I am diving deep from the lens of the burden of care work. So how the budget lessens the burden of care work, or how it actually reinforces the burden of care work that is on women. So I will look at it from a real social protection perspective, which I frame to also include employment and care. So I think Godson has mentioned a lot of the social protection interventions, so the overt interventions that have been running in Ghana for the last decade and a half or even more, and for which the government has indeed increased the budget allocations to these sectors. So you talk about LEAP, the school feeding program, the capitation grant, and also decapping of the GET fund to fund the national health insurance. The GET fund to fund free SHS, as well as the decapping of the national health insurance levy so that it can provide more funding for the national health insurance scheme. The government has also introduced some new social protection interventions, which Godson has also talked about, including the no academic fee policy, the free tertiary education for persons with disability, the primary healthcare, or what they call the Mahama Cares project, as well as the free sanitary pad. Now, what we see is that these social intervention programs or instruments are indeed contributing to ensuring that those sections of the population that for one reason or the other are not able to use their own income to benefit from some of these services, whether it's education or health, can benefit from these services through the social protection instruments, and which is commendable. In terms of the ability of these social protection interventions to make a real difference, I think there's been quite a lot of studies on our social protection interventions in terms of their ability to target people correctly, but also the actual amounts, for instance, in the LEAP program that is being disbursed and what differences these are making in the lives of people. So although these interventions and the increased budgetary allocations or the increased social interventions that are being introduced would help alleviate vulnerability among many households, we have to really hope that the targeting will be done right, which the social protection policies and discussions are constantly spotlighted as one of the fundamental challenges of social protection in Ghana. But I think still looking at social protection and exactly reflecting on what social protection means, I think social protection encompasses all policies and programs that are designed to prevent or protect individuals against poverty, vulnerability, and social inclusion. And what we see is that the emphasis in many of these interventions are on the protection side, which requires also defining some set of vulnerabilities for people to meet those requirements to benefit from social protection. In terms of the preventive side of social protection, which is really fundamental to ensure that households do not slip into poverty in the first place, which would put a lot of burden on women's care work. I think one of the fundamental ways of looking at the preventive side of social protection is through employment. And employment is one of the things that really offers people an actual social security in terms of the decent employment that comes with some possibilities of having aspects of the care work being socialized through, say, subsidized healthcare, subsidized childcare, or if people get entitled to paid maternity, paternity, or family care leave, then they are able to have some burden of the care work taken from the domestic domain into some sort of public or corporate domain with some subsidies. And so employment is very important as a social protection measure that prevents families from slipping into poverty in the first place. And what we see is that fundamentally in the last 2 decades or so, having some robust employment for the teeming youth in the country has been a challenge. And this budget also centralizes the issue of employment. In fact, the budget sees employment as one of the main indicators for its macroeconomic policy or agenda. It sees creating massive employment as one of the ways to stabilize the economy, of course, in addition to ensuring that the cedi does not continue to depreciate. So the budget and employment, we see the introduction of a lot of initiatives that are hoping to improve, bring about massive job creation, which include, of course, the main one is the 24-hour economy, which we hope that will propel some opportunities for more people. And we are yet to see how it would operate, because the budget also indicates that the current labor bill would be revised to factor in the 24-hour economy. But we also see the Big Push program, which is geared towards construction or infrastructure development, with the possibility of opening some jobs within that industry. The National Apprenticeship Program, the Ejumawura Program, the Digital Jobs Initiative, and the Agriculture for Jobs Initiative, as well as another initiative called Rapid Industrialization. So we see a lot of these initiatives that are being proposed with budgetary allocations within the budget, with the hope that massive jobs would be created. Now, the budget really looks at the way, highlights that in terms of real public sector employment, we don't think that there can be a lot of employment within the public sector because of course, the current restrictions on employment because of the IMF program. And then the question about these employment initiatives in terms of how they are able to provide real social protection is highly dependent on 2 things. For women themselves, how they are able to access these employment initiatives, and 2, what kinds of jobs are these going to be, whether it's self-employment or it's some sort of paid employment with an employer. What are these jobs going to look like? What would be the conditions of work? Are these jobs that can secure current income security, but importantly also secure income security in the future through, say, pension schemes? And also, what really would be the extent of support, especially issues around the apprenticeship program or the digital jobs initiative for agriculture for jobs? What would be the extent of support for the government to ensure that these jobs are indeed decent jobs? Because if employment offers social protection, it's only evident in the decency of that employment and not just the employment per se. I think that in the Fourth Republic, we've seen a lot of these initiatives, and the evidence around these initiatives, unfortunately, haven't been very positive. So while we hope to have a positive outlook that these initiatives would contribute to creating decent jobs that can offer real social protection, I think the details are yet to unfold. So that is the bit about the employment. And quickly, I want to go into the budget and its position on care, especially on direct care. And here I want to highlight
for
care.
1 minute.
1 minute.
Faustina.
Okay, so I want to highlight just two issues around care. I think caring for persons with disabilities and caring for the aged has been one of the fundamental issues in this country. And so the Disability Act and then the aging policy both call for the establishment of a disability fund or an active aging fund. And what we see is that the budget is completely silent on this fund. So it's implicitly proposing that it would be a business as usual, where ministries, departments, and agencies or MMDAs are expected to allocate some of the budget that has been allocated to them towards the issues of aging and disability, which rarely happens from our experience. And so the silences in caring for these people is something that is going to implicate women's burden of care work that is already the main source of taking care of persons with disability, as well as the aged. And then quickly, there are some two issues that seems to be a bit indirect, but I want to flag here, is the issue around energy. And here I am talking about gas, and I'm also talking about electricity. So what we see is that the budget is saying that the weighted average cost of gas is likely to increase. And then there would also be that constant quarterly adjustment. And then, so we should expect that there's going to be some changes in the cost of gas. And we don't know, we don't think that this would be a downward adjustment. From my experience, it's likely to always be an upward adjustment, which currently the cost of gas is already an issue. And so additional increases in the cost of gas, as well as electricity, where the government is proposing to bring the private sector in terms of the collection side of it, under the narrative that the private sector will bring in some efficiency. But our experience with the private sector in terms of social services provision has indicated that because of the profit motive in there, sometimes the inclusion of private sector in some PPPs around the social services increases the cost of these social services. And energy, specifically gas and electricity, are central to lessening the burden of care work for women. So imagine, because of the cost of electricity, women decide
I have to ask you to wind up.
Sure. So imagine the cost of electricity means that the usual labor-saving technologies like blenders, refrigerators, and things are going to be difficult for women to use in their homes. Then indirectly, the budget is just reinforcing the burden of care work on women. So thank you. I think I'll end here.
Thank you very much, Faustina. I'm sorry I put so much pressure on you, but we are sort of running against time. So thank you very much to all the presenters for your inputs. I think you've put on the table a lot that can be considered and discussed. I don't have anything yet, but I do have one comment that I see here, which I'm going to read. And it says that NANAMA has raised crucial questions which must be addressed for women to benefit from the budget as stated. Implementation and monitoring are very important. We don't want just paperwork without proper implementation. And indeed, I think this is a theme that is running through almost all the presentations, where basically you could say that we've got, and the presenters have laid out before us different aspects of the budget that are of interest and would benefit women. But then they are all saying, one way or the other, that the devil is in the detail of implementation. But we have here another comment, very interesting discussions. And I'm hearing for the first time a simplification of government initiatives and programs targeted at women, children, and youth empowerment. Who in our government structure is tasked with the responsibility for simplifying all the interventions for women, children, and youth empowerment to the level that women, children, and youth at different levels can understand, especially the non-literate? CSOs are trying their bit, but their funders may have their eyes elsewhere. Armed with information about the initiatives is a step towards accessing them and holding government accountable. Yes. So we need information, and people need to know what indeed government is committing to do, so that indeed government then can be made accountable. Yes, Please, you may ask questions. You may raise your hands if necessary. So can I call Techuamenu? Yes.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Let me start by thanking the presenters.
We can't hear you, at least I can't hear you.
Oh,
Speak a bit louder.
hello, can you hear me?
This is better, yes.
Wow, I'm screaming. So I want to
No,
thank
maybe it's me.
Sorry, okay, so you can hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so I said I wanted to thank the presenters for very insightful presentations. One thing I didn't hear from any of them was about debt. And I was wondering, considering last week, and Professor Odro, you were there, I chaired a session at the Academy on debt, investment, and growth in Ghana. So I was curious about, but it still fits in with some of the things that many of you said. I missed the big picture, given that a budget is typically for 1 year. I wondered how, and I think Teresa's presentation picked up on some of them, how the budget relates to some of the very long-term and persistent challenges that we face, and how, you know, this 1 year, and it's not even going to be 1 year because many of the initiatives that you mentioned, many of you, are yet to be identified, set up, etc. So the time that it has is even more limited. So, but I wondered how it tagged on to some wicked problems, if you like, in our economy. From the lecture on debt, investment, and growth last week, it emerged that, well, not emerged, it's known that whilst our debt has been growing, our public investment has been declining. Specifically, the figure that in 2010, our public investment was about 6.9% of GDP, but as at last year, it was only about 2.4%. So something that I think Godwin and Faustina also raised about issues around care. If some of these public investments are not taking place, it does put a real burden on individuals to make up for what is not coming from. So I miss the kind of linkages to the broad picture of what is happening in the economy, and especially the issue of debt and how it affects our ability, the consistency. Abina, you talked about policy evaporation, etc. So I wondered if any of you wanted to comment on the issue of debt and how it affects, you know, the whole issue of women's empowerment or possibilities for women's, an improvement in our conditions. Thank you very much.
Well, whilst colleagues are putting their thoughts together, I could also chip in. Godson gave us some statistics in terms of the decline in the share of education and health as a share of total expenditure. And you wonder why that may be. And the issue of debt that you have raised comes into play here, because you find that as a share of total expenditure, interest payments constitute almost 24% of total government expenditure. And this is in the 2025 budget. And this is an increase of almost 4 percentage points from 2024. So this is one way in which, debt is underlying everything, because our commitments to having to make the interest payments means that money is being, siphoned to service the debt, and it's at the cost of something. And in this instance, we are seeing that there are declines in the share, even though the nominal values are rising. you find that there are declines in the share of social spending. And then we have the ripple effects that have been linked, that our presenters, in terms of the implications for women's care work, for example. I see that Matilda, oh, I thought I saw somebody wanting to speak. Yes, Faustina.
Yes, Prof, thank you for highlighting that. I think the issue of the decreasing spending in the social sectors, whereas the nominal values on social protection intervention seems to be increasing, it's one of concern. And indeed, it's also ties into the long-standing discussions that have been going on in this country on really paying attention to what social protection is supposed to do. But I think we see that the inability of successive governments to really tackle the enduring or the structural issues of social protection to ensure that people are not moving from, say, middle income to low income and slipping into poverty is the reason why we seem to be focusing so much on social protection interventions that require some targets, and so that we are seen as doing something for the social sectors. But in terms of the actual monies that are going towards these interventions and the actual differences these interventions are making in the economy, it's really small. And so even when these social protection instruments are being implemented, we keep seeing that many families or many households are moving to the category of extreme poor. And anytime households slip that low, there's a lot of requirement on women's labor, both in the productive and reproductive sphere, because they have to subsidize to reproduce these households. So they are doing more work in the informal sector, as well as having to make time to take care of the other persons in the households who are probably not having gainful employment. So I think these are structural issues that goes beyond a single budget per se, but I think successive budgets would also have to make the attempt to allocate enough funding to sort of tackle some of these structural issues. We have to start from somewhere.
Thank you, Faustina.
So if I may add, so
yes, Gloria.
Yes, so on the issue of debt, unfortunately, that is the reality that we have to face. I mean, our macroeconomic environment is not good at all. I mean, going to the international capital market is, I mean, out of our alternatives now. And so for me, I think that if what, I mean, the revenue measures indicated in the budget and the kind of management initiatives, I mean, public finance management initiatives proposed in the budget, if there's anything to go by, and we are hoping that, I mean, if the government can be committed in enforcing them, then it will be a good starting point to start cleaning up our mess in terms of our debt situation. And hopefully, if the government remains committed in subsequent, this year and probably in a couple of years more, then we should have a better macroeconomic environment that could support proper investment in the care infrastructure, if, I mean, we hold our government accountable for that. So unfortunately, it's the necessary evil that we have to deal for now, given our macroeconomic environment now. And so we believe that if the government stayed committed to what the proposals made in the budget, then we are on the path to a sustainable, debt situation. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. So we have 6 more minutes to go. Do we have any more observations or questions from our participants? Yes, Ekuya Brichum.
Yeah. Many thanks for this presentation and a long overdue initiative, and I want to commend you all. And the presentations for me are very comprehensive and covered the usual issues. In terms of the reactions that are coming up, it is very clear that the economic policy frame is important, you know. So what informs our budgets and our ability to break through in terms of even the whole issue about the economic mess that we are in. Do you plan looking at that? Because then the economy can produce so much in terms of revenue collection and disbursement. So there's a project look to going there. Then my second question, if you would like to indulge me, is that the question has come up. So how can we hold government accountable? And I'm wondering, right now we have the Affirmative Action Act. What does it offer as an umbrella instrument for making claims? And finally, do you have any lessons to offer the government for the next budget? Thank you.
Okay, Ekuya, and I see Alima, and then I go back to the panelists to respond. Alima.
So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm really very much enjoying the discussions, especially that some of us are not able to digest the budget the way you have done that. Yeah, so just to add up, so today I organized a forum for young women, youth, persons with disability, and then we brought the NDC to them for more questioning on this budgeting as well as the manifesto that they submitted. And then we are getting the impression that we need to do more because people just are voting, they are just hearing this is what is happening, but basically people don't understand the dynamics. So on the issue of the banking, the clarity it's not very clear. I don't know whether in the budget, the way you analyze it, whether it is about decentralized, they'll decentralize it or it's going to just be at the top there, where every woman who wants to access must definitely go to the center to be able to access. And then also about the agri. You know, a lot of women are in the agri business value chain. So it's not also very clear as to how the women really can benefit when it comes to the women in agricultural sites, given some of the good things that one of the panelists was highlighting that the budget has really picked. So I would like a clarification on that so that next time we are engaging women and persons with disability, we'll be able to go straight to the issues to support them to be able to access some of the services when it becomes operational. If not, they will just be there, and a lot more of our women and young people may just still be left out, and they will still have our gender issues the way it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on each of the panelists and you pick whatever issue, because there are a number of, I think, 4 or 5 questions that have come up. You pick which one you would like to respond to. So I'm going to start with Teresa.
Sorry, can you repeat what you said?
Yes, Teresa, a number of questions have been asked. And I was saying that would you want to, you can choose whichever one or couple of them that you would like to respond to. And we had a question about, that probably is not for you. Are we trying to understand the budgetary process? But there's a question about how can we make government accountable and what role is there for the Affirmative Action Act. Then there's the issue about the women's banking. Basically, what is being asked is, how is it going to be made operational so that indeed women will be able to access it? So these are some of the questions. Would you want to respond to any of them?
Since I'm not in government, I wouldn't be able to know how they want to make it operational. I think we are all waiting to see how some of these policies roll out, the implementation of these policies. Currently, what we have are the broad policies, the broad-based policies, like a bird's eye view sort of thing. So now we need to get into the nitty-gritty of how it's going to roll out. So I think what is important for me where I sit is how do we just make sure that we are not left behind as women? Which agencies are responsible for safeguarding our interests and ensuring that all these policies that have been announced with budget line items are really going to ensure that women get our fair share of it in various areas, in all the areas that they've been mentioned. Which agency? I'm a bit confused as to is it the Ministry for Gender and Social Protection, or I heard someone mention about women's desks in the various ministries. I don't know. It's quite a gray area for me, and so if anybody here can.
So indeed, it means that we need more clarity.
Yes, clarity on how they will be implemented. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you. May I ask Gloria? Gloria, please respond to any of the issues that have been put on the table.
Prof, I'm struggling. I lost the very first question, but I don't know if what I heard is, exactly what he said. So it was about how to produce more revenue. Am I right?
Yukria, is that what you were asking?
Yeah, no, yeah, maybe directly, how do we get more revenue? But then, in fact, how we get more revenue also is determined by the economic framework within which we operate, so clearly, are you going to look at that as well? Because certain economies and how they are run can just produce so much. We are locked into this debt trap, and the debt trap will undermine all good intentions of government. So I'm asking if the project is engaging with that as well.
Oh, okay, the direction of the project.
Yeah.
What I picked up was, are we trying to understand the budgetary process? And I would say that the answer is yes.
Yes.
It's work in progress.
That was also the second question, because then that goes to what advice do you have for government for the next budget?
Okay. Okay. So Gloria, do you want to respond, or I can move to somebody as you put your thoughts together?
I think so, because in terms of the way the questions are framed from what we are going to do next, I think I would rather leave it for the PIs in terms of our direction, where we are going from here. But if it's about, getting more revenue, she started. I think the budget makes some proposals, and the issue is whether the government will be committed in implementing them. Because for me, where I said, I think we haven't really done very well with regard to the property in tax, and that is a very low-hanging fruit for which the government can capitalize to raise a lot of revenue. And as I indicated earlier, not just to raise a lot of revenue, but also use that form of taxation to achieve inclusive growth in terms of redistribution of income. Another area that I think could also be a useful source of raising more resources will be revisiting our Exemption Act, because clearly, if you look at it, on some, even the private sector, they are enjoying some exemptions that, for me, I think that we have to reconsider and probably, impose taxation on certain things. One thing I found interesting was some of the exemptions given to religious bodies. We all know that these days religious bodies are becoming like business entities, and so for me, the kind of exemptions given them, we should relook at these things and then see how we can mobilize resources from them. Given, if you look at the kind of activities those religious bodies are doing in the country, clearly, they are into business. So there's another opportunity to get more revenue to, finance the things that matter most when it comes to women's economic empowerment.
Thank you, Gloria. Can I call on Nanama? Nanama, we've now exceeded our time, so if we can be short and snappy.
Yes, please. So for me, I think that monitoring should be done by both the public and the private sector. So for example, we can have the EWN, NetRight, other women's groups working together with the Ministry of Women to track, first of all, maybe come out with indicators and milestones and then track it as the initiatives are being implemented. So I think that it doesn't fall on the lap of just one group of people. It should be concerted efforts amongst friends of women and women groups to track that. And then secondly, she talked somewhat, there was another question on budgeting, what we would let the government do later for next year. I think that the engagement with the market women, for example, was very good. The engagement with women bodies was good. I think though that it was not enough time. They didn't give it enough time to make it meaningful in the budget. So I think that in the next budget, they should start early and probably before we even get to the next budget, they can have reps of these markets, for example, monitoring how they are doing when it comes to women and financial inclusion, for example. But I think that next time they can start these engagements early and ensure that the voices of these women are included in the 2026 budget.
Thank you. Faustina?
Yes, so on the issue of how do we ensure that these kinds of initiatives and the information around these initiatives gets to the people that can benefit from these initiatives, I think the Information Services Department, it has it as one of its mandates to ensure this. And then the constant issue is also the under-resourcing of these departments. So unfortunately, we have had to rely on a lot of civil society organizations that take it upon themselves to ensure that sections of the population that can benefit from some of these social protection interventions hear about them and they can benefit from them. So with the issue with the free tertiary education for persons with disability, for instance, I think before people can even get to tertiary and benefit from this, we have to pay attention to how the inclusive education policy, which starts from the basic level that we have now defined senior high schools to be part of it, how the inclusive education policy in itself is implemented, because it's fundamental to ensuring that people can go through basic education and complete high school for them to benefit from the free tertiary education. Either than that, this policy would be there for persons with disability, but the actual numbers of persons with disabilities that can benefit from this would be woefully low. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Godson. Godson, are you there? Or maybe we've lost Godson. I don't see him on my screen. Oh, okay. All right. So in terms of understanding the budgetary process, this is something actually that we are working on, and indeed, we are planning on interviews so that we do have a clear handle on what informs our revenue targets and what is the link between revenue and spending. These are issues that we're interested in. How can we make government accountable? And mention was made about the Affirmative Action Act. And indeed, the Act has the beginnings of guidelines as to what the different ministries are supposed to do. And there is the legislative instrument that should be developed. So it is important that this legislative instrument is developed very, very quickly, very soon, so that it can help in being able to implement the provisions of the Act. But a good question which Teresa raised and which other participants have raised is, who implementation is so critical. We talk about the Women's World Bank. Is it going to be up there situated in Accra, or as Faustina asked, is it going to be down to the rural areas and the communities? So the issues of implementation are important. Women should be integral in the policy-making process, from the formulation of policy to monitoring and evaluation. And then we do have an institution. We have the Ministry of Gender and Women and Social Protection. What is the original mandate of this ministry? The minister is a member of cabinet. What is the original mandate of this ministry? And can this ministry be adequately resourced? Godson tells us that I think less than 1% of spending goes to the Ministry of Gender. So to what extent can this ministry be resourced and maybe play the role that we are thinking needs to be played in terms of a coordinating role so that we can realize the promises that have been put in the budget. So thank you all very much. I do apologize. We are 10 minutes and beyond what we said was our scheduled time. But the fact that almost all of you have stayed until the very end suggests how engaging this discussion has been. And so I would just like to say thank you. Many of you are on our mailing list, and we will definitely be inviting you to our events, inviting you to when we are going to be disseminating our findings, etc. So thank you to my colleagues as well. Thank you for these presentations and for the discussions. Again, thank you to the participants, and then I hope you have a very good evening.
Thank you for having us as well.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you too.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.